Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast from still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me, my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni, Matt Green, is here. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. It is good to be back with you again, talking ball like we do every weekend. And what a weekend it was, sir. I feel like it's college football, this thing, we're 10 weeks in. It's over before you know it, but every week it delivers, I feel like.
Kind of 10 weeks in. I don't know. Tennessee's played, 8 games now? Still 4 games
this was
to go.
literally week 10, though.
I mean, I get
we
that,
had the 2 bye weeks this year.
Yeah.
It's very, very weird. I don't know.
We've got a lot of football yet. I'm not sad.
scientist.
Vanderbilt's when I usually get sad, obviously, because the last week of the season, that sort of things. It always hits me Vanderbilt week where I'm like, man, it's gone. I don't know. I'm not there yet. I'm not going to get sentimental and sad just yet.
No, I hear you, man. It's we're just getting into the thick of things. I'm no scientist or mathematician or anything, but I legit do not know where this second week came from. I'm looking at the start of the season. It's like that's Labor Day weekend. The end of this SEC championship is the first weekend of December. Like, can someone explain to me where the extra week came from? Like, I'm so confused. Maybe someone can explain it.
That I cannot. But it seems like, a lot of folks seems like they haven't enjoyed it, and it's more detrimental to some teams where they lose some momentum, and the 2 weeks away, it's good for some guys to get healthy, obviously, like Miles Kitselman talked about it, Tennessee's tight end. It was good. He got his legs back or something. He had a good game on Saturday night against Kentucky, where for some guys I think it's beneficial, but obviously we talked about the record here a week or two ago. SEC had struggled coming out of the byes early on here. So I don't know. It is kind of interesting. You would think in theory, most people would love 2 bye weeks in the season to get healthy over the course of a challenging slate of games like the SEC schedule presents. But by and large, I think most programs are probably we'd actually probably like 1, because we get, it's hard if you get a big win and then you kind of lose some momentum, like Georgia beats Texas, and then they kind of have to sit, and you lose kind of that momentum from week over week of a big time win, and then you have to just sit and wait for that next game, and the next game's not as big. So I don't know. I do think it's kind of interesting how that bye week mindset differs from team to team.
Yeah, and who knows if it's a good thing or not. The first bye week is the one that felt weird. Like the bye week before Florida, it's that's an every year thing. Mm-hmm. But what was it? The bye week before Alabama too, that Georgia had. So yeah, it is what it is. I don't know where it came from, but I'm just as a fan, it's I want more weeks with my team playing. So I'm not pro two bye weeks, but I don't know. I'm not the one making the decisions.
Hey, we still got a month of football to go for both Georgia and Tennessee with 4 games left here. Final SEC home game for Tennessee on Saturday. They still got UTEP, but the final SEC home game is against Mississippi State on Saturday that we'll get into later this week, Matt Green. But it was a separation Saturday for a lot of teams here. We talked about it on the pod where I think a lot of people were like, oh man, it's going to be chaos. I don't know how we're going to have all these tiebreakers and who's going to get in. And then it's oh, right, that teams are going to lose and some of these teams are going to falter. And that's what happens.
We're going to play each other.
Yes.
That's just eventually going to happen.
We always get nervous about this in late October, early November, where it's wow, what is the committee going to do? And it's actually the committee might have
7 undefeated teams.
Yeah. And then it's no, we're down to what, 4? Is it 4?
I think that's right. We got Oregon, Miami, Indiana, BYU, and then Army is also undefeated.
Army,
so we got 5.
Yeah. 4 Power 4, I guess we should say. 4 Power 4 undefeated.
Oh, Army's not powerful to you, sir? Wow. Wow.
Dad's in the Marines.
Wow. Okay.
This is a naval family.
On. We'll just
but I am
leave
pro
that one
Jeff
right
Monken.
there.
He's been on the program. Very pro Jeff Monken, pro Army, pro Air Force, pro Navy, but
Army, not a power school, says Chase Thomas.
Do you think they get in if they go undefeated in the AAC over Boise? I feel like they still just can't pass Boise.
Ooh.
If Boise wins out.
Win at that point, Navy? Will that be the
Notre Dame, right?
Oh, they got to play Notre Dame. So yeah, if they go undefeated, I think they have to be in over Boise State. Like the good loss
Okay.
versus Oregon is the best thing they have. But if they actually beat Notre Dame, like that's better than anything that's on Boise State's resume.
What if their only loss is Notre Dame and Boise's only loss is Oregon
You're just
close?
going off the quality loss metric.
Yeah.
I
guess
mean,
Boise
just
gets in
based
there
on
too.
that, especially depending on how the game goes. I mean, Oregon's clearly better than Notre Dame. So,
Yeah.
and like Oregon, they took a kick and a punt back in that game or something. Like they needed some luck on their side to beat Boise State too. Like they easily could have won that game. But yeah, I'm still anticipating it being Boise State, but we'll see.
We shall see.
They'll
Matt Green.
decide it before Army Navy. Like that could be one of the better wins on their schedule, quote unquote. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna manage that, but we'll see.
That is true. All right, Matt Green. Well, let's dive into, before we get into our actual Week 10 takeaways and how we did over the weekend, let's get into how our two teams fared here, sir. Vols, another strong defensive effort. Tennessee has not given up 20 points in a ball game through 8 games here. Haven't given up 20 points nearing a year now, because the last time they gave up 20 points or more was against Vanderbilt in 2023. So it's been a little bit, Matt Green here. We're 3 games away from Tennessee going a full year without giving up 20 points or more in a football game. But they beat Kentucky 28-18 here. Before I dive into my thoughts, what were your thoughts on Tennessee taking care of business to improve to 7-1 on the season?
I love how you frame these games, sir. When Georgia played Auburn, it was they escaped Auburn, and when they played Mississippi State, it was like barely hangs on. But this is taking care of business versus Kentucky. This was kind of a rock fight for 4 quarters, I would say. Like, and another game. What's Tennessee? This deal with the devil they have. Another game where the starting quarterback goes out. I don't know what they got going on in the water up there in Knoxville, but let's hope who they got this. Who's Vanderbilt or who's Tennessee? Y'all got Mississippi State this week?
Yes. Van Buren coming to town.
Let's hope Van Buren can make it through this one, but he's already what was he, second or third string coming into the season?
He was second. Yeah, Shapen went out.
Yeah, he's come on at times, but no, I thought this was, I think you still have to be worried about Tennessee's offense in terms of just another game where they score 7 points in the first 2 quarters. Like at least they did ruin in that scoreless drought in the first half. But I personally thought that this was the best game I've seen Nico play in a Tennessee uniform. I thought he just, like, in terms of like his presence in the pocket, getting out of some things and picking up first downs, like, and just the balls he was throwing. He had at least 2 drop touchdowns. It may have been 3.
Yeah.
Like there was some he was actually putting it on the money on those deep throws that we've seen him miss open guys all year long. And now he hits a couple of those open guys, and now the receivers drop the pass. So it's that's kind of how it's felt at Carson Beck at times. It's like he's had his struggles of his own, and then the receivers are not helping him out, and then it just kind of compounds to struggles on the offense. So I think 28 points against Kentucky, it's not like a bad offensive performance by any means, but this was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter with, if we're going power ranking wise, the 15th best team in the SEC, 14th. Kentucky's close to the bottom. So, it's a solid win. The defense looks good against a bad offense, but still another close win. And I think if you see these receivers start to catch some of these passes, this is what people have wanted from Nico, or kind of anticipated Nico becoming. And I feel like you could see it more in this game, but the offense still has to click more for them to be, the title contender that they want to be.
I think that's fair. I think Dylan Sampson breaking the record here on Saturday night. He's up to 19 touchdowns this season, which is just crazy with where Dylan Sampson's at. And he was huge in the second half. And this one, once again, 2 TDs in the second half for him. But to your point, Nico, 28 of 38. And that there were several drops. One of the drops I won't put on the tight end Kitzelman, where he got rocked, and it was a great helmet on the ball in the end zone crosser. Like that's that's fine. That's not a bad drop. That was a better play by the Kentucky defender. Like that happens. But
yeah,
the Chris Brazzell drop on the long bomb early in this game, that was 6. That can't happen. And then Chaz Nimrod, the crosser that Jalen Hyatt had against, honestly, I think it was either against Bama or Kentucky in 2022, where that was a touchdown. And it just like there was nobody behind him. Like if he catches that in stride, that's 50 yards, yak, TD. And Nico's over 400 because he finished at like 298 in this game. No turnovers. I wrote about it today. I think this was Nico's best game as a Tennessee ball, which is where you want to be right now. You're getting into November now, and Nico playing his best football is the best case scenario for this team. The receivers still have a lot of work to do. Like it's just all across the board. The receiver play has to improve. Brew struggled in this one. I thought Chris Brazzell had a really tough day. He had 2 catches on 5 targets. Squirrel White had 2 catches total. Nimrod, obviously the big drop, but he also had a really big catch on the right-hand side, so you got to see kind of both there. Mike Matthews got in a little bit, but it was really the tight ends. Kitzelman had a huge day for Tennessee through the air, and so did Holden Stays at the other tight end spot, so that was good. I also love Peyton Lewis, true freshman blue chipper out of Salem, Virginia, 4-star. He got a full series, the first touchdown series to tie it up. Peyton Lewis came in there after the Dylan Sampson fumble, and he drove right down the field and got a bunch of opportunities, scored the touchdown. That was really good to see if you're a Tennessee guy right now, because I think Sampson, we've talked about it in this pod for the last couple weeks, I've written about it. He's carrying a heavy workload. He had, I think, 27, 28 carries in this game, but you got to have some guys start popping. And Deshaun Bishop, we don't know what the latest on how dinged up he is because he left the game. So we'll see where he's at, RB2. But Peyton Lewis showing kind of like the Nate Frazier thing, where as Georgia, like, yeah, you feel good about Trevor Etienne and the upside there, but you want depth in the modern running back room. Like, you just want to have multiple guys you can count on. And I think similar to Nate Frazier, who popped for Georgia on Saturday, I think you see some of the same traits with Peyton Lewis at Tennessee. I think Peyton Lewis, when he got picked up, he's the highest rated Tennessee back Heupel's brought in to this point. I think he's going to be a really good player, and he just kind of has that complete look, that speed and size and power. I think Peyton Lewis is going to be a really good player, so that was really good to see him get in there. But to your point, I think Nico is just huge, and the quarterback situation for opposing quarterbacks, they're just getting drilled. Like this Tennessee defensive line, like James Pierce just sandwiched Brock Vandegrift on that one, and I just think that's part of playing this.
I'll say
Tennessee
this one, they knocked him out of the game. There's been a lot of just guys getting benched for playing poorly, and then there's been an injury or two. Taylor Green, I think, was just I don't know if that was like a knocking him out of the game type thing. Obviously things happen. It's football, but
right. No, and I'm just saying, like, it's just one of those where you're playing a front, like, this is just a front seven that's going to get to the quarterback. And I think when you have a team that just gets to the quarterback over and over again, like, hey, you better have the backup ready, because this team is just, they make life hard. That's why no one scored 20 or more points against this team all year long. It's a collective effort. Willa Brooks has another big pick in this game. Andre Turrentine has one. But yeah, the front seven, James Pierce, Joshua Josephs and company, David Hobbs had a really good game in this one. Amari and Bryson running it. The one thing that surprised me, though, is early on, Kentucky had a 75-yard drive that ended in the red zone where they go for it on 4th down and don't get in. And the next drive, they drive 70-something yards again, which I hadn't seen from Tennessee all year. Kentucky, 2 great opening drives to really put Tennessee on their heels. Well, that made me a little nervous with how that game was going. And they ended up rushing for almost 5 yards to carry against Tennessee. And that's double what teams have been able to do against Tennessee's front all year. So it was actually a pretty solid day for Kentucky's offensive game plan against Tennessee. But I think more than anything, this Tennessee defense just every week, like everyone's like, well, the offense still has some problems. But I think the 2 main things is, look, this defense travels in the sport, and that's why Tennessee's going to have a shot against Georgia in 2 weeks, is that this defense is going to keep that game close regardless of what the offense looks like. It's going to be a top 10 matchup like it was 2 years ago, but the difference is Tennessee did not have this kind of defense when they went to Athens 2 years ago. Those bombs from Stetson down the field to Arian Smith and stuff like that, like, it's just Tennessee hasn't given up that all year, and that they were giving those plays up in 2022. And I just don't think they have the horses.
This also offense is also averaging half as many points a game as that offense did in
Right, but I'm just
2022.
saying this defense is going to make that a game. Like anyone who's expecting like a repeat of 2022, I don't think that's going to be the case. I'm not saying I'm ready to predict Tennessee to win that ball game in 2 weeks, but I do think the defense is going, based on especially what we've seen from Carson Beck over the last few weeks. Tennessee's defense is going to cause problems for that Georgia offense. And I don't know if the Tennessee receivers are going to be able to do it, but Nico, the best thing coming out of this weekend is Nico played his best game as a ball. And when you are at this point, at this juncture, when you have the CFP and reach, you want your 5-star redshirt freshman quarterback to be playing like this. And I think Nico, if he can put more and more games like that together the rest of the way, Tennessee's going to be really hard to beat down the stretch here.
I'm with you there. And I think this was the first game that I think, some of that potential talk has been more like relevant, that it's like, it felt like a lot of it was premature. It's like, okay, he's big and he looks good and everything, but he hasn't been, I would say in the above, he hasn't been the upper echelon of SEC quarterbacks like this season by any means, but I think this was definitely an encouraging sign. But my job on this podcast is to play Debbie Downer for Tennessee. So
is that your job?
It is my job. Absolutely,
okay.
Sir. I gotta bring the fall folk down a little bit. Like you said, Kentucky had a lot of success running the ball, 174 yards on the ground. I believe that's the most Tennessee's given up in a game this year.
Yeah.
And if I am Tennessee and I'm looking at all the opponents we faced this year, who is the best offense that Tennessee has gone up against? Because
Arkansas, probably.
Arkansas, Alabama, I would say, are probably
maybe Alabama,
two.
But I think Arkansas has been better by and large up until this Saturday. Arkansas was better.
As good as the numbers are and everything, we've probably seen them play the worst offenses in the SEC when it comes to Oklahoma, when it comes to Kentucky now. Like we've seen them play a lot at Florida. They've done what they've done. They haven't been a very good team offensively. So I don't know. I think that's the one thing I'll say. Tennessee does look good, I think, regardless of who they've played. But that's if they do play, and that's the one thing this year. There's not a lot of those elite quarterbacks, so there's a chance you get all the way to the national championship and not face that Deshaun Watson, that Trevor Lawrence that's going to expose your team or something. So they could get all the way to the national title, still with the team they got right here.
Yeah. Well, let's flip the script here, Matt Green, because I think I deserve an apology for calling this one down the... Oh, also, final thing too. Kentucky covering just felt like inevitable. Like, Kentucky played Georgia, obviously, extremely well, played Ole Miss extremely well and beat them. This team just gets up for these big games. Like, Kentucky's bad. Like, against lesser teams in the SEC, they've been getting their brains beat in. But for whatever reason, Kentucky, they just get up for these big games against the top tier SEC teams. So that was
they have a way of just kind of getting games into the mud and just kind of mucking them up and keeping the opposing offense off the field. That's like the best thing Kentucky does, honestly.
Yeah. Georgia, though, they survive in advance in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. We'll never know. I texted you. I'm like, I cannot believe we're never going to know what this game would have looked like if DJ Lagway, unfortunately, does not get hurt in that second quarter after a bomb down the field over that Georgia secondary. Matt Green, he was running really well. They were leading when DJ Lagway left. Carson Beck had one of the worst first halves I've seen Carson Beck have in a long time in this game. He throws 3 picks.
I don't know, man. I don't think you can just... I think we have to start comparing first halves. We can't... Every week it can't be the worst first half, right? He's put up a bunch of terrible ones.
What is it like for you in the Green household right now with the family? Like, walk us through this week over week, because I mean, I'm going through the Dogs HQ like message board and reading Georgia fans stuff on Twitter and everything else, and like they're calling for Jaden Daniels, Gunnar Stockton, or Jaden Rashada, and guys like that, and they're like, oh, he's just you can't move on from him. Clearly, Kirby's going to ride with Carson Beck through the ups and downs the rest of the season. He Carson Beck is the guy the rest of the way, regardless of what's happening in these games. But what is it like for you the last couple of weeks? Because you beat Texas. He plays the whole game. That was one of the worst spec games you'll ever see. I mean, he talks about it. He's like, I don't think they could stop us when I wasn't throwing interceptions or something, or turning the ball over, I think is what he said. Something like that in the post-game scrum. But, like, what is it like right now? Because the difference with Carson Beck versus these other guys, like Nico's second-year player, like Carson Beck has been here forever. He returned to, like, potential number 1 overall pick. Like, he has been in college football for a long time. And it's just, I don't know. Like, I just couldn't, because Georgia has the horses and you know that they can win the national title, but they have not had a quarterback like this where you're just like, he's throwing it all over the place. He has the arm talent to make every throw, but he also, the decision making in these games is just, it's just wild. Like, it's got to be maddening. So I'm just curious from your vantage point what this is like for you.
So before we get into Carson Beck, I need to touch on the DJ Lagway, because Carson Beck's a bigger story. DJ Lagway was in for 4 drives.
Mm-hmm.
There was 2 punts, a touchdown, and a field goal.
Mm-hmm.
He was 2 for 6 for 47 yards, and they were up 10-3. Like, let's not act like DJ Lagway was just balling out on Georgia, and if he played,
he was getting momentum.
Yeah, I mean,
when he went out, like, that's when things started cooking.
I mean, one was off the interception, so they had a short field. So, I mean, they went 37 yards on 10 plays. That's not exactly cooking. And you got a field goal. It's like, yeah, they were up 10-3. They're definitely going to do better with DJ Lagway playing. Like, I don't like not acknowledge that Georgia could have lost if DJ Lagway was playing, but let's not act like DJ Lagway was just cooking the Georgia defense. Like, he completed 1 long pass. Like, it was a touchdown. It was a beautiful throw, but like, that's all it was through what you got her like halfway through the second quarter. And
like I said, I'm not saying Florida would have won this game, but I hate that we were robbed of seeing how that game would have played out in the second half.
No, that's fair. I think it was a dangerous game if Lagway's playing, no doubt. But to go to Carson Beck, and you said at one point, like, we know Georgia has the horses. That's like the thing is, like, people kind of want to have it both ways. They want to talk trash about Georgia's playmakers, and then when Beck plays poorly, it's like, oh, well, Georgia has all these 4 and 5 stars. Like, why are they so bad? It's like, well, you just said their playmakers weren't good. Like, I think Jordan Rodgers did a pretty good breakdown of some of the interceptions that were thrown in the Texas game, and like the routes, kind of the way they're being broken off, and just kind of miscommunication among the receivers. Like, that's, I think there is, I would have said going into the Florida game, Beck has not been his best, but I think his struggles were exaggerated. I think he also he's done a lot of good and had a lot of bad, just so many interceptions. But the interceptions in this game versus Florida, it was just, there was no window. Like, it was just some terrible decision making. Also, I don't want to get into the eye black and the war paint had going on, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, what is this? What are we doing here? I've never seen. I don't even think he rocks the regular eye black. I think he's, I don't know, Jackson Dart. I've talked smack about Jackson Dart's Braveheart thing he's got going on. That's way cooler than what Carson Beck looks like. I don't know. I hope Carson Beck ditches that for the Ole Miss game next week. But like you said, 11 interceptions in the last 5 games. It's just it's crazy. I think you're kind of beside yourself, because obviously losing guys like Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, like, you can expect a certain regression in this offense. But I think you weren't expecting the regression to come from the quarterback. Like, even Jake Fromm, like, gets a lot of grief for how much worse he was his junior year than his sophomore year. And it's like, I think he threw 5 picks the whole season, and they were all in the South Carolina and LSU games. I think he threw 5 picks in those 2 games. And I think it had like a 24-5, like, just an efficient year, I don't know. Beck is being asked to do a lot in this offense because they can't run the ball as well as Georgia has in the past. But I don't know. The decision making you're seeing at times is definitely it's definitely been questionable.
So what are you just resolved to this is how it's going to be? Do you feel like Beck is still capable of winning a national title and making it through this? Like, do you think the turnover stuff gets cleaned up? Do you think it's a situation where, I mean, almost like the yips with Carson Beck? Like, I mean, some of those picks, I mean, I don't know. Like, what do you feel is the best
third one
route
was just
here.
a deflection, right? It's like it got hit up in the air, and I think the
Yeah.
linebacker picked it off. I mean, that's happened a couple times. So I mean, those are going to happen. No, I don't know. I'm in a logical Georgia fan household, so I don't know what people are talking about. Who's online talking about Gunnar Stockton, Jaden Rashada? Like my mind never went to like benching Carson Beck. So
At
I
all
don't
on
know.
Saturday, never.
I mean, no, because I mean, I still have faith in Carson Beck. It's like it's in terms of just I know Carson Beck can be a good quarterback, and I feel more than anything, I feel confident that he's the best that Georgia has. So, Rashada has some experience, whatever. Stockton essentially has no experience. So we did talk about how of the national title contenders, like how many teams have a quarterback that's clearly better than Carson Beck? Like Cam Ward, Dylan Gabriel, like would you say Will Howard is clearly better than Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers or Drew Allard? Like Curtis Rourke has been better than Carson Beck for sure. Like has Nico been better than Carson Beck? Like
I think right now Nico is better than Carson Beck.
He's turned the ball over less, but he's also thrown less touchdowns and thrown for way less yards. So it's like because you look at the game, I mean Carson Beck still was 25 of 40. Threw two touchdowns, so it's like over 300 yards. So that is the other thing too. Like this game was 2020. 7 minutes left. Georgia's got the 3rd and 7 deep in their territory, and Carson Beck hits Arian Smith on the 3rd down to pick up the big first down. It felt a lot like in the Texas game, like after that controversial call, and Texas cut it to what I think 8 and had all the momentum. Like Georgia's sitting in a 3rd and long, and they trust Beck deep in their own territory on 3rd down, hits Arian Smith for like a gain of 20 something, I think that time. So those felt a lot of like kind of exhale type of throws. Like he is still the guy. And then I think right after that completion to Arian Smith, he had the long completion to Lucky, and then Georgia, takes the lead late in the game. So I think without a doubt, if you look at Georgia, you're not thinking like, hey, this is the best team in college football. But I mean, who is, other than the Oregon Ducks, who right now is thinking we are the best team in college football? Like we saw Ohio State, what they've been against an Oregon, and what they did against Nebraska, right? Like we've seen what Texas lost to this Georgia team, right? We've seen Tennessee have a lot of these close games with these, inferior competition, losing to a team like Arkansas. So you look at some of these other contenders. Miami needed a Hail Mary, right? Or an overturned call to beat Virginia Tech, right? A Cal kind of miracle to beat Cal. So I think there's a lot of teams at the top of college football that are have their strengths and have their weaknesses, and I think Georgia's one of them.
I think that's fair. Any final things on Georgia, Florida from this weekend?
I'll say one thing I looked up because I was wondering I was surprised at how many Georgia quarterbacks had thrown double-digit interceptions, actually. So Stafford threw double-digit picks all 3 years at Georgia. So that's a fun fact for you folks out there. David Green had a terrible junior year, 11 picks. I think he had like 13 touchdowns and 11 picks. I think he was like SEC Offensive Player of the Year the year before. Murray had 1 year, his sophomore year, threw 14 interceptions. Joe Cox is the most I can find in recent history. He threw 15. So what is Beck sitting on now? He's thrown 11 in the last 5 games. Are those all 11 that he's thrown this year? What are his stats? I'm pulling up. He's 17 touchdowns and 11 picks. So he's definitely knocking on the door to break that record, 15 that Joe Cox had in 2009. So let's hope we can get that handled.
And it's not going to get any easier. He's got the number 1 and number 3 scoring defense in college football on the docket the next 2 weeks. So
for sure. Oof. And there is the silver lining. This is the last thing I'll say. The silver lining, your quarterback has thrown 3 interceptions 3 different times this year, and you won 2 of those games by 2 touchdowns, and you lost one of them by 7 against Alabama in Tuscaloosa. So there is something to be said that this team has overcome a lot of adversity. It seems like if you talk about, the things that certain teams had to improve on, not throwing interceptions seems like one of the more improvable, correctable things in college football. And if this Georgia team, because that's the other thing, they did still have like 450 yards of offense. like there was a lot of, there's a lot of success moving the ball when they weren't turning it over. So, that's this offense has still been good at times. It just, I don't know if anyone's talking about Mike Bobo. It's definitely not on Mike Bobo. This has been Carson Beck. I don't know what's happening. He's not playing his best ball, but we've seen it. We saw it in 2023. Hopefully we see him return to that in 2024. But, definitely reason for concern at this point.
I love it. All right, Matt Green. Well, how did we do this weekend?
It was not Separation Saturday in our pick'em, sir. We kept right along, even with each other. We both went 8-4 overall, win-loss, and we both went 5-7 against the spread this week. So, it was some good, some bad. We'll bounce back. Zeus, home dog of the week, 2 weeks in a row. South Carolina was a winner this week. So Zeus now 9-6 on the season.
There you go. Way to go, Zeus. Couple of things that we got to hit to in our reaction show here tonight on week 10 here, Matt Green. We have to hit South Carolina. They blow out A&M on Saturday. We both picked that one. It just felt like South Carolina at night. Like as a team, this was just a recipe for disaster for A&M. I don't want, if I'm a good team and South Carolina's good and has this kind of defensive front, I don't want to go. I don't want to go to Columbia on a Saturday night and deal with that environment because it's legit. I don't think it's a question. South Carolina is the most underrated venue in the SEC when they're jumping, especially at night. But huge win for Beamer and that program. And I ask you, Matt Green, everyone was talking about like, oh, what if Texas A&M runs the table in Texas A&M? Both have one loss going into that battle here in a couple weeks, Matt Green. I spin it around. Like I'm looking at the South Carolina schedule. We've joked that like South Carolina is like the best 4-3 team in college football. Are they going to be the best 9-3 team in college football? Because I'm looking at the schedule. 9-3 is possible, right?
It definitely is. They are now the best 5-3 team in college football. Although I think Vanderbilt and Louisville both got into the top 25 this week. 3 lost teams, and the Gamecocks still sitting there on the outside looking in. I'm shocked by that. I
also love Mizzou falling out of the top 25 on a bye.
Yeah,
I don't know how that works, but sure.
Good enough. Love the all black unis also. These South Carolina unis are perfect.
But hold on, we need to pause that. That doesn't mean other college football SIDs and social media teams and everybody else listening to this. That does not mean we want UCLA wearing all black uniforms for a game next year. We don't want the Washington Huskies to be donning the all black.
Look over here, the Tennessee Volunteers coming off.
Those are great.
But black is not a color of Tennessee's, though. That is
black and orange. I don't know. It just works. Like Tennessee just won a natty with black and orange, so it's got to be in the rotation forever.
No, they look good. The dark mode look great. But South Carolina's
the white helmet year.
They're without a doubt the most exciting team in college football. Like every game they have, I swear there's like more 50-yard touchdowns in their games than any other team in college football. Like they're just it's constant, just big play after big play. These games are always so much fun. I have a take for you, sir. The biggest loser of the Texas and Oklahoma addition to the SEC is the South Carolina Gamecocks. If this is the SEC East and the SEC West, South Carolina might be the best team in the SEC East this year. Like this team definitely could beat Georgia. They could definitely beat Tennessee. Are you kidding me? You've seen the way Georgia and Tennessee played against Kentucky and Florida. Like South Carolina Gamecocks, this team, this defensive line has been dominant. This was the best game I've seen Lenoris Sellers play. Like Lenoris Sellers is coming along as this season's come along. Rocket Sanders has looked great, looking like 2022 Rocket Sanders. Like this, I think this team may have been in the SEC championship game if this was still the SEC East. Well, who they lost to? Alabama, LSU, and Ole Miss. Like they're not playing all three of those. In the old schedule. They're only playing one of those because they had the locked rival with A&M, and so they just would have won that. So I don't know who they would have played in the rotation, but Yeah, this South Carolina team, they may have been hosed because this team might have been able to get to Atlanta.
If they finish 9-3 with some of their wins, I mean, I guess they can't make the playoff, but would there be some push to get 9-3 South Carolina, like over a 10-2 SEC team?
No, because they definitely don't have enough good wins. I mean, who's the best win? A&M's the best win,
Yeah.
and then that's really it. Like if they beat Vanderbilt and Missouri,
Clemson too would
Clemson,
be technically a yeah.
Those are going to be three of their best, like 4 or 5 wins. Like Oklahoma, that was a dominant win. So they look good, but in terms of being 3 loss, like I don't know if you have enough like data points, like this Florida schedule. Like if they went 9-3, like they would be enough like top 10, 15 wins to hang your hat on. Because Clemson, I think Clemson's reputation took a hit this week.
That is true. I mean, Clemson, but again, like the teams that lost in the Big 12 and ACC, all that really did was just like, if you win your conference, like Clemson can still make the playoff. They're still in position to make the ACC title game. Like there's still ways for them to, they're not going to get an at large, but I think more than anything, what we saw from this weekend was like if you're a Big 12 and ACC commissioner, you're pretty pissed because now I think it's locked in. You're getting 1 apiece. Like there was a path to 2 apiece. That's now gone. Like now you're getting 1. You're conference champion, and that's it.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Those became 1 bid leagues this weekend, unless there's some chaos. Like I don't know. There's a scenario where 12-1 BYU loses the conference championship and still gets in, or Miami goes 12-0 and loses to SMU or Clemson, the ACC championship. Like if Miami or BYU go undefeated, and lose the conference championship game, that's possible. But yeah, I think you're right. I think they're most likely, and I think most likely those teams probably won't lose, but or who knows? The Big 12, something crazy will happen. There'll be a 2-loss champion by the end of it. There's still like 4 weeks to go, right?
I mean, they're beating each other up. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Colorado right now has a very real path to a bye and making the CFP right now.
They still need some things to happen though, because BYU doesn't have the most difficult schedule, I don't think.
I'm saying all they got to do is make the title game. Like if they make the title game, anything. That's what I'm saying. Like and I think Colorado would beat BYU in the title game right now.
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
Penn State, we know they're not winning any big games because they did not win another big game on Saturday. But the mistake was playing this game at noon. What are we doing? Like this even looked weird at noon. It was a crazy game early on. Will Howard made some big plays. I will say they really leaned in on the broadcast, and like a lot of folks were like, "Oh, Will Howard taking it personal that Penn State didn't recruit him." Like, look at where he was in the rankings. Like, I mean, I get it. Like, I get you need the chip on your shoulder here. Like, it adds a level to this rivalry as a Pennsylvania kid and this and the other. But I'm like, are we gonna go after Penn State for like recruiting over? Like, he was in the 40s, I think. Like, I was like, he was a solid player. He's a 3-star kid, but like, I think it's okay that he wasn't a take in Happy Valley as a freshman. I think that's okay. I don't think we have to beat up Penn State for this narrative. Yeah, Will Howard, he worked out at Kansas State, but now he's doing well at Ohio State. Like that's a cool story, but I think it's disingenuous and kind of silly that the stuff I was hearing on Saturday where it was like, oh, taking it personal. It's not like the number 3 kid in his class wasn't a take for Penn State. It's like, come on now, like let's be real about this. Like he's overachieved and it's good. Like he's a good story, but let's not beat up Penn State for not taking Will Howard in that original class. Like it's okay.
I mean, not to beat up Penn State, but it's reasonable to have a chip on your shoulder. Like they said,
for sure, for his perspective. I'm just saying on the broadcast and everything else. Like, what are we doing? What are we talking about here? Like, it's not a big deal. Like, it's totally fine that Penn State did not take Will Howard out of high school.
No, I'm with you. This was.
But what did you make of this, sir? Because my immediate reaction and kind of the biggest takeaway I have, the biggest question I have for you coming out of this game is like, did it matter to you that it doesn't matter that Penn State lost this game in the grand scheme of things? Because this is one of those games where I think the college football expansion folks who are against it, this is what they're talking about, where Ohio State beats Penn State and you're like, wow, Penn State loses another big game and this, that, and the other. And then you're like, oh, right, Penn State's going 10-2 at worst. They're making the playoff. Ohio State's making the playoff. They might meet again in the CFP. They might meet again in the Big Ten title game. And it just didn't feel like it hurt. Like you lost. It was tough at home. You want to win that game. But this is, I think, the kind of game that the CFP expansion, the anti-CFP expansion folks cite. Like, this is what you're losing. Is that this would have been a big deal a couple years ago. Now this is not a big deal because both these teams are going to make the playoff.
100%, man. And this is like, especially in the Big Ten, like I know we're the, SEC haters and everything, but it's like, it feels like there's some of these teams that have like 2 games a year that you kind of circle that are like nationally relevant games. And then it's like, so they could just lose those 2 games and still get in the playoff. So what did they actually do to get in the college ball playoff? And that's what the weird dynamic around this game. Like James Franklin being whatever his record, I don't have it in front of me, against top 10 teams that people always cite, or top 5 teams that people always cite. Like another game that he lost against a top competition, but he wasn't under the most pressure because it's like, okay, well, this is what he does every year. And he loses to these games to the best teams. And then they end up like number 7 or number 8 or 9 in the polls at the end of the season. And under the new format, that's a playoff team. So yeah, it's, the devil's advocate is that, okay, well, maybe they're just not as good as Ohio State, but they could be better than the best team coming out of the ACC or the Big 12 or the second best team in the SEC some years, depending on what the case is, or the best team, who knows? But like, I think that's probably the biggest, argument for the expansion. But yeah, this game just didn't have the same feel. Like for Ohio State, it did, because it's going to be loss number 2. And they don't really have any big time wins on their schedule if they lose to Penn State and to Oregon. So obviously Indiana, that's going to be a big one coming up. Even if people don't really respect Indiana in terms of being a blue blood or in terms of the traditional recruiting programs. But yeah, I think when I knew that Penn State was going to lose this game was before halftime. So what is the score, right? It was 14-10 at halftime. They get the ball with 1:30 and on the Ohio State 49-yard line, right at midfield. And they waste about, like, I don't know, 30, 40 seconds. Like you could tell it was like one of those things like, well, we don't want to go too fast because if we get stopped, they can get the ball back and score. And it's like the fact that that's kind of where your head's at, and not like, we have 1.5 minutes to score and take the lead before halftime, and we have the ball at midfield. You're thinking like, I feel like it just felt like James Franklin didn't trust his team and didn't trust his offense. And what did they do? They drove down the field. What did they had the 1st and goal at like the 3-yard line, 4-yard line, and they essentially ran out of time. And they had to, and then they threw the pick right before the half. So, but they could have had like another 30 seconds. Maybe they run the ball a couple times. They get down in there. So that was when it just felt like this is another Ohio State Michigan game, or another Ohio State Penn State game, where they don't score an offensive touchdown, where they just, what do they have? 3 trips to inside the 10 that ended up in with 1 field goal. Like,
something crazy like that.
It's just, it felt like Penn State is the same team every single year. And this feels like an Ohio State team that's a little bit worse than they are most years. And it's still, if Penn State wasn't going to beat them this year, like they're never going to beat them, because Ohio State, this is not one of their better teams. And I think
you say that though, they might get them 2 more times.
I mean, they could, but right now they're not getting them in the Big Ten championship. I mean, Ohio State, I guess. Yeah, I mean, there's no scenario of Penn State getting the Big Ten championship.
No, there's
right?
scenarios like Oregon can still falter twice, or I mean, I'm not saying it's likely.
Who's beating Oregon though? No,
but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's still possible, technically.
But Indiana's sitting over there undefeated, like right now too.
Well,
so.
Oregon's still got to go to Wisconsin, and they got Washington at home and Maryland at home.
Okay, so I mean, that should be a pretty manageable slate for Oregon, for the number 1 team in the country, So I don't know. At least Ohio State and Indiana, that's going to be a big game in a couple weeks. But I don't know. I don't think Penn State could be one of those teams. I think with 1 loss, it's just no question that they're a top 12 team. But they could be one of those teams that gets to the playoff without like 1 good win. Like, who's the best win right now? Illinois, Michigan. No, they haven't played Michigan, have they?
No.
Yeah, West Virginia. I don't know.
No.
USC is losing. How many games in a row has USC lost at this point? Like
USC is just in every. I have no strong take on USC right now. I don't know. They're in every game. Like they're just.
They've lost 4 of their last 5.
Yeah, I don't know. USC's in a weird spot. I don't. I'm reserving my take on USC.
They weren't in the Rutgers game. They got blown out of that one.
Matt Green. Let's pivot here to. Do you have an SEC 3-way tie scenario you want to hit?
I do, sir. I think there's this guy on Reddit. I don't have the proper credit, but there's someone on Reddit that has created this SEC tiebreaker calculator. And so running the numbers, you can just pick any game. So essentially, we're not going to have chalk, so it's hard to know exactly, what some of these tiebreakers are going to be because the opposing winning percentage and that sort of thing, the second and third tiebreakers can change. But if LSU runs the table, that is the scenario where we could get a 3-way tiebreaker, because the cleanest way for us to not have a tiebreaker, I think, in the SEC, and I will say I'm not counting the Ole Miss game as a win for Georgia. Like that's definitely a toss-up game going on the road in Oxford. But for the sake of argument, if we get if LSU does lose to Alabama this weekend, that removes the one loss, the 3-way, any chance of a 3-way tie of 1-loss teams, and then it's basically if things are clean, it can come down to the winner of Texas A&M will play the winner of Tennessee Georgia, and it feels like that's like the cleanest way things can kind of happen. But if LSU runs the table and Texas and Tennessee run the table, like A&M, the crazy thought right now is you look at the current rankings, the only 2 teams in the SEC that control their own destiny to get to the conference championship are the 2 teams that would not make the college football playoff right now. It's LSU and Texas A&M. Those are the only 2 teams, if they win out, they would not get in. They will get in the SEC championship. If those are the 2 winners, Georgia actually ends up third in that scenario because of, I think it's like the conference, the opponent's winning percentage. If Tennessee wins out and they're in any scenario of Texas or A&M along with LSU, Tennessee loses out because of the loss to Arkansas. They have the laws that like their record in games versus common opponents. That's where A&M and LSU would both, or Texas would both have the edge on Tennessee. But so like if it's Georgia and Texas, then Georgia would obviously, that's a clean head-to-head. Georgia beat Texas, so they would get in against LSU. But yeah, it's kind of a crazy scenario right now of what could happen at the end of this college football season. Georgia could literally be the number 1 ranked team in the country, go 11-1 and not make the SEC championship. And so that would be a crazy scenario.
That's a Just World if I've ever heard one.
And according to some people, that might be what you want, because if Georgia does get that, then what? Instead of getting that home playoff game, you're basically guaranteed to be the number 5 seed, get that home playoff game, and then you get matched up with the Big 12 champion in that 4 seed, and then that might be the easiest road to actually getting to the semifinals. So there's some argument to that 5 seed could actually be a really quality seed to have. But obviously, being the SEC guy that I am, I want my team to win an SEC championship. But yeah, it's we could be in for some interesting. I think any sort of 3-way tie scenario with 1-loss teams. If something crazy happens, we have a bunch of 2-loss teams, you can throw this all out the window. But any sort of 3-way tie with 1-loss teams, Tennessee would be one of the ones left out. Like they won't have any tiebreaker to be able to get in there.
I'm here for it. But I did see like Heather Dinich, I think, on ESPN, where it's like Tennessee might need to go 11-1 and run the table to make the playoff. Like like Alabama at 10-2 might get in over a 10-2 Tennessee, which is like, again, if that happens, why are we playing these games? If Alabama got in over Tennessee at 10-2 just because they beat LSU, and that will drive me. Let's hope that does not happen. We get to a point where Alabama finds their way in at 10-2 over a 10-2 Tennessee team if Tennessee does end up beating Alabama, or having beaten Alabama in a head-to-head spot. Like if we get to that point, man, woof. I'm glad Saban. I respect Nick Saban, but I'm glad it's not Nick Saban at Alabama right now if that scenario comes up, because that would be a lot more of a sweat-inducing situation for Tennessee if Saban is gonna in that spot. But I don't know. I still think Tennessee gets in there, but it is something to, I guess, think about is what happens if Alabama runs the table here.
I think 10-2 Tennessee. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bias in this sport, and they're one of those teams that kind of had a lot of, expectations coming into the season. And so when you're that preseason top 7, top 8 type of team, and you go 10-2 and your losses also, like the losses at that point, I guess we assume would be to Georgia and Arkansas. Like Alabama lost to Vanderbilt and that same Tennessee team, like the literal team we're talking about. So I don't see any scenario where that could happen.
Fair enough. We kind of already touched on Clemson, right? Like we don't really have to keep going in the Clemson thing here. They're done. Louisville, huge win for that program, but Clemson's out unless they win the ACC and win the conference title game and everything else. But
yeah, I'd been had, sir. It's happened to the best of us, But I got hypnotized by those phony numbers, by the big time 40, 50 point games against inferior competition. It happens to the best of us. Wasn't the first, won't be the last, but Louisville by far the second best team they've played to this point, and they absolutely like the score. What did the score end up being? It was like 12 points by the end of it. Like Louisville dominated them in this game. Like this was not close. The score looked a lot closer in the end, but yeah. Like you're saying, we kind of touched on this already. The ACC took a hit with this Clemson loss on Saturday night.
Goodness gracious.
Luckily, most people weren't watching. Most people were watching South Carolina. I had to be going back and forth. Also, great feature of my cable package. The little, like when you go flashback, it can kind of like keep it like DVR style, kind of just keep you behind. So I was able to like basically watch Kentucky, Tennessee, and South Carolina A&M like at the same time. I'd be like, start catch up here, flashback, catch up over here. It was a quality Saturday night.
There you go. RB Heisman take, Matt Green.
Yeah, I got a hot take for you, sir. I thought about busting it out, when you were having your Tennessee conversation, but hot Heisman take here. I think to this point, there's a few Heisman contenders, right? I would say the Heisman list to this point is Travis Hunter, Ashton Jeanty, Cam Ward, and Dylan Gabriel. Those feel like the 4 contenders. Ashton Jeanty should not be the only running back in the Heisman conversation. That is my hot take. Like, what he's doing is great, and this guy looks really good. Are we just gonna like forget that he's playing against Mountain West competition every week? Like Caleb Johnson over here at Iowa has been an absolute workhorse, and he also has 20 total touchdowns. He's got over 1,200 yards, like playing against Big Ten competition each week. Dylan Sampson's almost at 1,000 yards. Playing against the SEC, he's up to 20 touchdowns on the season. Like, I don't know. Ashton Jeanty is a great player, but it feels like he's the only running back that's even in this like conversation because he's trying to break Barry Sanders' record. It's like Melvin Gordon was putting up like, what did he put up, like 2,500 yards, 2,400 yards. And I mean, he was a finalist, but I don't feel like he ever really got like, I don't know, the amount of hype Ashton Jeanty's getting right now. Like, I don't know, the level of competition. I don't want to be Buzz Killington over here, but I feel like the level of competition has to be factored in when talking about Ashton Jeanty winning the Heisman Trophy. Best player in college football, his best game's a loss to Oregon. Is that what we're doing?
I mean, I hear you, but there's only so many spots. And he's having a special year. What is he at? 1,500 yards already. Caleb Johnson and Dylan Sampson, both really good players. I don't know. I think it's fair. It's just a great story. I mean, he's cool. he like stands up in the backfield. It's one of the cooler stances of running back. Like that's part of a Heisman thing.
Guy. That's what we're giving Heisman's for. Big cool guy.
I mean, it's pretty cool back there, Matt Green. It's pretty badass what he does when he lines up there in that stance. Like, I don't know. Ashton Jeanty is just a cool story, and Boise's cool, and I think people just want to, like there aren't going to be many more of these Ashton Jeanty stories. I think as college football, the power two and the powers that be continue to break away here. I don't think we're going to see these kind of stories nearly as much as we used to. So just kind of embrace them when they come in, and just it would be cool if they can get a Boise guy in that room, because it's not very common. Get
him in the room. He deserves to be in the room.
I also think Shedeur belongs in the room too. If we're gonna do this like in the best 5, I'd probably put Shedeur at 5. I'd probably put Shedeur at 5.
Yeah, if you're gonna put 3 quarterbacks in there, I think
Shedeur has to be one of them. He's the best quarterback in the country this year.
But giving to Colorado 2 guys is bold. I think Travis Hunter has got to be the winner. Just if he keeps doing what he's doing, it's just this dude's just amazing. But I don't know. I just think Caleb Johnson at Iowa is getting vastly overlooked. Like, this offense has been a lot better this year. It's not because they have like great quarterback play all of a sudden. Like,
Caleb Johnson mentioned that like Shedeur, I mean, he's completing 75% of his passes, averaging 8.6 yards per attempt, 21 TDs, only 6 picks. Like, we're talking about all these quarterbacks around the conference or around the country who you feel good about. And I'm like, I think Shedeur is the only one that I feel great about. Like, Shedeur is just on a team that can't win the title, but I think Shedeur is been the best quarterback. Like, Cam Ward is the most exciting, but Cam Ward's the most up and down. And I think he's probably been he feels the most Heisman-y. But to me, Shedeur in Miami, I think would be better. Like, I really do believe that. Like, I think Shedeur is just a really good complete quarterback who doesn't have the running ability that Cam does. But I don't know. Shedeur is good. And I just feel like he's put himself, if you're going to put Travis Hunter there, I think you also have to put Shedeur. I think right now they both belong in that final ceremony.
I mean, I don't hate that take, honestly. I think Shedeur is better than Dylan Gabriel. I think it's just Dylan Gabriel is just fitting that mold that you need.
Dan Lanning is moving Dylan Gabriel out immediately, right? Like, if you have a Shedeur Dylan Gabriel trade, you're like, Dylan, we appreciate you, man. Cool story, but we're gonna have to we're gonna bring in Shedeur here.
He just is that blueprint, like number one quarterback on the number one team in the country. He's got good stats. Like, he's had clutch moments. Like, it's he's definitely done himself a service and put himself in that conversation.
Final thing here before we wrap with our CFP ranking predictions, or not even predictions, just our who our top 12 are here. Matt Green, Auburn take. Do you have something on Auburn?
Got an Auburn take, sir. Brian Harsin was fired before he finished 2 seasons at Auburn University, sir. Do you know what Hugh Freeze's record is now as the head coach of the Auburn Tigers?
Is it the exact same, or is it right there?
It's 9-13, sir. It is now worse than Brian Harsin's record was when he got fired. We talked a lot about coaching hot seat stuff before the season started. If I was made, czar of the SEC, and I had to go look at everybody's programs, give them an internal audit, all that, if I was dissecting every team's program and I had to fire one coach in the SEC, it would be Hugh Freeze. Like, honestly, like, you look at who are the hottest seats, Billy Napier and Sam Pittman coming into the year. Like, I think they've at least had some encouraging signs as the years gone along. In Florida, Napier's definitely going to be, if he was able to get a win or two in this final stretch, it's like he had a chance to save
the Lagway injury. I think sealed his fate, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be really given any grace with that Lagway, even though Lagway is hurt and Mertz is obviously hurt too. But so that is what it is. But I feel like you were picking Florida to beat Georgia. You had seen enough encouraging signs in Florida to kind of be like, hey, they might be able to beat Georgia. Auburn is just like, they look worse and worse almost every week. Like, Vanderbilt, they score.
They just won last week.
Yeah, they won, but I mean, did they look good? Like,
But they're in every game. The offense isn't bad. Like, the offense has been making strides. They have talent. Like, the offense isn't bad.
I mean, they've turned the
They're
ball
in
over.
every game. It's kind of like one of those things where Auburn's in every game. Like, Auburn's not a dumpster fire. Like, it's just Auburn. I think this is not the year, but next year is huge. I think Q, if it's not like 8-4 or better next year, I think it's probably like it's not going to work. I still think this one hurts, but they're recruiting too well. I mean, you got a top 5 class here, and you've got some real talent. You just cannot get quarterback wrong next year if you're Auburn Hugh Freeze. Like, this sucks down the stretch, but I don't know. I'm not writing off the Hugh Freeze stuff just yet. I think next year is
I'll
the
say
year.
this. If I was this hypothetical SEC czar, I don't think anyone should get fired this year because I think Napier, it's rough schedule, multiple quarterbacks injured. It's tough, but I don't know. I think Hugh Freeze has got to have the hottest seat going into 2024. In 2025.
I think it's Mark Stoops. If it was anybody, I wouldn't go that. I would go Stoops.
But what are the expectations at Kentucky? Like,
I mean, you just don't want to get too bad.
Playing
you don't want to go too far
They've
the other
played more
way.
competitive games than Auburn, I would say. Like, Kentucky's been in some games against good teams. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I'm hiring Jeff Monken.
1-5, 3-6.
Like, go get the Army coach. Like, it's time to pivot to the triple, Kentucky. You've had fun being the Iowa team, and you've won a lot of games. Go triple now. Or go hire Jamie Chadwell or something from Liberty. Like, I just think it's time and run that offense.
No one should ever go triple. That's just you can't triple stamp, double stamp. Everybody knows that, sir. But
Vanderbilt just swept the state of Alabama running some version of the triple
option, though. Like, the true triple option, like Navy, Georgia Tech or something. Like, you can't be winning anything with that.
I mean, they won the ACC. They went to the Orange Bowl. Matt Green, Jonathan Dwyer, Roddy.
They won when he had
Nesbitt.
Division I players that were already on the roster. That's when that team was its best. Once Paul Johnson brought his own guys in, they turned into a FCS program.
I don't know. If there was one for me this year, it would be Mark Stoops. Final thing here, Matt Green. I think we interpreted this question differently. Did you do this based on what you expect the predictions to be or the rankings to be on Tuesday night, or your personal 1 through 12?
I think maybe a little bit of both. It's a hybrid. I can't separate my mind from the committee's mind. So this is, if I'm in the committee, this is what I'm doing.
Oh, see, I just did straight 1 through 12 here. Who I think the 12 I power rated. Who I think can win, basically who can win the title and who are the best teams right now. So this will be interesting because we did this
first playoff
a little bit different.
Come out Tuesday, so we're saying if you're the SEC, if you're the committee the chairman, what you put in the order, because I see some hot takes on your top 12 here, and I don't know where we need to start, but I know that's not how you would rank it if it was just a current, like that's how you're actually picking the playoff.
No, that's how, if I'm in the room this week, this is how I'm doing it based on what I've seen to this point.
Okay.
This is what I'm doing. 1 Oregon, 2 Ohio State, 3 Texas, 4 Georgia, 5 Ole Miss, 6 Tennessee, 7 Miami, 8 Alabama, 9 Penn State, 10 LSU, 11 Indiana, 12 Notre Dame. That's who I think the 12 best teams right now.
And then Boise State is probably getting in with there at some point. They're the highest ranked. So who you have?
No, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm just talking about, like, I did 1 through 12 in terms of who are the best 12 teams right now.
No, but I'm saying, and so to keep this on like college football playoff, format. So like, do you think Boise State is that team that gets in?
Yeah, I think they're going to go Boise. Yeah.
Okay. So
and I think obviously BYU in that, but I just don't think that's fun. Like, I don't want to. I think that's. I'm doing it based on the rankings, how it should be 1 through 12.
So I went all the way down, but I'll go ahead and read mine, and then we can discuss this. I have 1 Oregon, 2 Georgia, 3 Ohio State, 4 Miami, 5 Indiana, 6 BYU, 7 Tennessee, 8 Texas, 9 Penn State, 10 Notre Dame, 11 SMU, 12 Alabama. But 12 Alabama would not be in the rankings. I went all the way down and had Boise State at 17, and they would be that 12th college football playoff team. But let's unpack this, sir. I thought
about putting South Carolina in over Indiana. Like, I think if South Carolina and Indiana played on a neutral site this week, I think South Carolina would win.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? But this is how college football works. This team is 9-0 now. Like Kirk Cignetti, first coach ever to start the season. I think 8-0 in consecutive years at two different schools. Now he's 9-0 here at Indiana. So let's start with Georgia. So I have Georgia at 2. You have Ohio State and Texas at 2 and 3. Explain why they're ahead of Georgia.
I mean, I still think Quinn Ewers has been better than Carson Beck. I still trust Texas as a whole. I think they're more talented. I think they had a bad game against Georgia. Obviously, that's a tough loss at home. But I mean, we saw them last year. We've seen Sark's record over the last 2 seasons.
Tough loss at home to who? To who exactly?
I mean, I'm not disagreeing, but you also lost to a down Bama team on the road. Like, I'm just saying, you almost lost to Kentucky. You were on the ropes against Florida.
Texas lost literally to Georgia.
I get it, but that's their only blemish. Like, that's it. Okay. Georgia's had multiple blemishes. Georgia has a quarterback who can't stop throwing it to the other team. Like, right now, if you played Georgia-Texas on a neutral site, I think 100 times, I think Texas is winning more than 50 of those games.
Georgia's loss is to the 8th-ranked team on your rankings here, though. It's not like it's by 7 points on the road.
I'm not disagreeing. I just still think Texas is the best team in the SEC this year. Like, until they cough up another one or whatever, I think Texas is still going to be fine.
So if you're in the committee room right now, you're saying, no, Chase Tom, I vote Texas ahead of Georgia. That's what you're telling me. That it was after you just said what you said about Tennessee.
I mean, they're still number 2, and they're still number 2 in scoring defense nationally. They're still number 2 there.
They beat them head to head in their own place.
I get it. We're ranking. We're still it's like the Pate poll. It's not what we're saying based on like who gets in based on when.
It's not the Pate poll. Those are power ratings. I honestly, the one thing I dislike about Josh Pate is the JP poll, because I think he has such a big platform and gambling has gotten so big that people like act like that matters. It's like we've ranked this sport the way we rank it for 100 years, and if you go 10-0, then you're a damn top 5 team. Like, that's how it works. Like, oh, what were they on a neutral field? It's like, I don't care what Vegas thinks. You've won all your games.
But it's not even Vegas. I'm just saying what my eyes say. Like, Indiana's not a top 5 team. Like, they're just not. Like, Indiana is just not that. They're a good story. They're getting blasted by the first good team they play in the playoffs.
Of course, but I mean, has Tennessee looked better than Indiana?
Oh yeah, Tennessee is beating
by
Indiana.
What? By barely beating Kentucky and barely beating Florida and losing to Arkansas?
They beat Alabama 2 weeks ago.
Of course, Indiana smashed everyone they've played. They haven't played a close game. So
I mean, they haven't played in Alabama. They haven't.
They haven't for sure. But you can't hypothetically.
Well, I'm saying where is Indiana better? Like, in terms, I'm being genuine. What about Indiana is better than Tennessee right now?
I mean, their quarterback has been significantly better this season. They're stomping everyone out.
I'm saying right now, we're power rating right now.
Because Nico looks good for one game doesn't mean that Curtis Works hasn't been
beat up.
Better.
Yeah.
That means he hasn't been better all season. It's like Indiana, this is how college.
Do you know Indiana's number 8 in total offense right now in yards per game? Tennessee's number 9.
I mean, dude, those early wins really inflate Tennessee.
But you're talking about Indiana. What wins are we talking about? And what schedule? Like,
all of them.
You're going to
criticize. They haven't lost.
But I mean, if you're going to criticize Tennessee's cupcakes and some of their wins, but like Indiana, you can't. Like, that's one area you can't. Like, if we're going to look at Indiana and Tennessee side by side, like, I'm just telling you, like, I don't know. I mean, obviously, defense, Tennessee wins that. Like, Curtis Rourke's having problems against this Tennessee front seven. Like, Indiana's offense is having problems. I mean, sure.
I mean, Nebraska almost beat Ohio State, and Indiana beat them by 50 points. Like, Indiana's been dominant when they play. It's like, Penn State was number 2 in the country before going into last week. Who the hell have they beaten? But Penn State has more of a reputation than Indiana. Like, Indiana, I know the kind of recruits Indiana gets versus other teams. So I don't think Indiana's going to win a national championship or anything. But to this point in the season, I think they without a doubt deserve to be like the number 5 team in the country. I mean, what has Miami proven that Indiana hasn't? Like, they've been playing.
I mean, I even think Miami behind Tennessee for me. Like, I mean, I think Tennessee to me, it's just Tennessee has not given up 20 points since Vanderbilt. It's almost a year. I just don't think Indiana can win that kind of game. And I just think Tennessee as a whole, their defense has raised their ceiling or their floor so high that I think there's only a couple teams in the country right now who can withstand what Tennessee is throwing at teams in their front seven. Like, it's just like it's Georgia, it's Texas, it's a couple teams, but it's not Indiana. Indiana will have
Tennessee
a lot of
does have a really good defense, and if they're playing on a neutral site, like I'm probably gonna bet Tennessee. But that doesn't mean to this point in the season they deserve to be ranked higher in college. They've
been more impressive. Tennessee's a more impressive overall team than Indiana.
They definitely haven't been more impressive. Like they've barely beaten some pretty bad teams this year. So Indiana's beaten everyone, and they've beaten everyone easily. Like BYU, if you're this late in the season, you're still undefeated. You're higher in the rankings. That's how it works. And like the teams that are at the very top, like a Georgia has a win over Texas. That's the best win that any of these teams have that have one loss, other than, Oregon obviously doesn't have a loss. Like Ohio State has the other win over a top 10 team from teams on this list. Like so I put Georgia and Ohio State still in that at the top, but Miami and Indiana, BYU, I put them all ahead of the other one-loss teams. Like Tennessee, I put ahead of Texas and Penn State because Tennessee has the best win of those teams.
Well, I think Ole Miss too is like, I'm surprised you haven't brought up Ole Miss. Like, I think I almost put Ole Miss ahead of Georgia.
I hadn't even gotten to that yet. So hold on. Before we get to that. So I have Tennessee. See, that's one thing. You have Texas at 3. I have Texas at 8. Like Texas, who's their best win? Vanderbilt? Is Vanderbilt? I mean, you're over here talking like Georgia is terrible.
And I didn't say that. I have them number 4 on my list.
But I'm saying you have talked a lot about the weaknesses of Georgia and how they cannot win a national championship, correct?
I asked the question if they can. I said they have the talent.
I'm not criticizing you of being overcritical of Georgia. I'm just saying you have the way you feel about Georgia. Georgia boat raced that Texas team. Like they dominated that offense. Like, so a way they haven't dominated one other team to this point. That for Georgia, that Texas game is the outlier. They look dominant in that game. But you look at what those one-loss teams have done. Like Texas hasn't really beaten anybody. Penn State hasn't beaten anybody. Tennessee at least has the win over Alabama. So I put them ahead of that group. But yeah, I don't see how you can have Texas up at number 3 for what they've done to this point in the season.
I'm surprised. We can end it on this. Ole Miss number 5. I almost put Ole Miss at number 4 on my. I mean, right now S&P Plus came out. Bill Connolly has Ole Miss beating. The computers have Ole Miss beating Georgia this weekend. They just thrashed Arkansas on the road. They have the number 1, like their scoring offense, right there, number 4. Nationally, they are, let's see,
that's
here.
Also the
number 1 in passing offense.
National stats.
They're number 6 in scoring defense. I just think if they didn't lay that bad egg late against Kentucky, we were looking at Ole Miss very differently. Like, Ole Miss is legitimately good. I don't know how to explain this to people, but Ole Miss is very good. Ole Miss can beat Georgia this weekend. Ole Miss can still run the table. Like, Jackson Dart's highs are still extremely high. They are still really well built with Walter Nolan and Princely and company in the trenches. Like, I think they're still good there. The offensive line solid. Jackson Dart, the best of Jackson Dart, is still really good. They need to get Trey Harris healthy, but they have talent running back. I mean, Ole Miss is a legitimately good team. Like, Ole Miss, I think, has shown enough where I'm like, look, man, I'm very, very excited for Ole Miss Georgia on Saturday because I think it's a coin flip game. But I think Ole Miss has shown me, like, they just seem more complete. And I think I trust Jackson Dart more than I trust Carson Beck right now. And that might be the difference.
I just don't. So you're telling me that if Reese Davis came out on Tuesday on this playoff rankings show and he said the Ole Miss Rebels are the number 5 team in the rankings, you would be like, that's a good ranking. That makes sense.
Yes.
They have 2 losses. What are we doing?
It doesn't matter.
They lost to Kentucky and they lost to LSU. It's not like they lost.
LSU's not a bad loss. LSU's a good team. I have them in my top 12.
Yeah, LSU's what? They're a top 15 team. They're fine.
They have the best quarterback in the SEC right now.
I mean, I think that's debatable. He hasn't looked. Yeah, that's maybe.
I mean, I trust Garrett Nussmeier over anybody else. I think Garrett Nussmeier's been the most consistent.
They've played like 5 one-score games. Like LSU has not been dominant by any means. So I don't know. I don't. Ole Miss, who's their best win? South Carolina, Oklahoma, like.
I mean, at Arkansas, like Arkansas's offense is legit, but they blew out Arkansas on the road. They embarrassed.
But this is just not the resume of a 2-loss team that you could even remotely talk about being top 5.
I mean, they embarrassed a South Carolina team that just beat a team that was in the top 10, 27-3 over South Carolina, who we both think is good. I'm just saying, I think
South Carolina, that's the best win.
Sure. I mean, I'm just saying, I think the best of Ole Miss, like dropping 63, like when this offense is humming, this Ole Miss offense is legit. I'm just saying their highs.
It dropped 63 when they're playing terrible teams, though. Like Arkansas.
I mean, but Georgia's not dropping 63 on anybody in the SEC. Like their offense isn't good enough. I think Ole Miss's upside offensively is still like LSU and Ole Miss. I think still have the most upside along with Texas offensively right now. I think they're the most complete. Like Ole Miss, Texas, and LSU.
Did you watch that Oklahoma game? That offense didn't look good versus Oklahoma.
Oklahoma's got a top 15 defense. Like it's good. Oklahoma's defense is solid.
They also have like 5 losses. Like I don't know.
I mean, we're gonna see. Like, are you okay with the fact that that's a toss-up game? Like that the game on Saturdays.
That was one of the games I'd circled as one of the more difficult games on the whole schedule.
I don't know as a Tennessee guy what I'm rooting for here, because if you lose to Ole Miss, it's like Georgia's not losing back-to-back games against Ole Miss and Tennessee. So is it like, do I have to root for Georgia this weekend because I don't want Georgia to be coming off a loss with Tennessee coming to town?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to root for Georgia so that we have this clean scenario of an SEC semifinal matchup of Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas A&M. But no, I don't understand your obsession with Ole Miss. Like, I'm not saying that Ole Miss can't beat Georgia, but to this point, like, they're not a college ball playoff team. Like, and you're talking about them being top 5. So,
I mean, I think they've been more impressive. I don't know. I'm an Ole Miss believer, and until they
76 points against Furman, that's carrying all of their national stats. Like,
not on defense.
I'm just saying they scored 17 versus Kentucky. They scored 27 versus South Carolina. Scored 26 versus LSU. 26 versus Oklahoma. Like 63 versus Arkansas. Obviously, was an explosion, but like.
They're only allowing 19.4 points per game. They're allowing 19.4 points per game in SEC play.
Yeah, I mean that's solid for sure. But it's not like this team. This offense,
I have a question though. I have a follow up. Is that more or less than what Georgia's allowing?
Oh, I'm sure it's less.
It is less.
And I'm not saying that they can't beat Georgia. That's not what I mean at all. But to this point, their resume is nowhere near being a top 5 team.
I tend to disagree. I like Ole Miss. All right, Matt Green.
If you saw Ole Miss ranked ahead of Tennessee, you would think that that's a good decision.
I think Tennessee fans would be apoplectic.
That's wild to me. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, right now, I think Ole Miss is better than Tennessee, and I think Ole Miss would beat Tennessee on a neutral site right now. I think Tennessee would have a good shot at beating them at Tennessee, but I think Ole Miss would have a good shot at beating them Tennessee at home. So I don't know. I think in a neutral, I think it's a coin flip. I think Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Georgia, Ole Miss, they're all coin flips. I think they're all a lot closer than each of these 3 or maybe Tennessee and Georgia fan bases like to believe. I think Ole Miss is legit.
Speaking of closer, my rankings are going to be a lot closer to what we see on Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, but I'm just doing it based on what I've seen all year and what I believe
in. We're going to do this again next week. And I want you to get this JP poll out of your brain, and you be a real committee member over here and rank these teams. Rank these teams seriously. After the Dogs go into Oxford, Mississippi.
It might be easier for us to do a bracket each week, like our updated bracket, so I can really get my head there.
Yeah, maybe we'll see what we can do.
Matt Green, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you next week.
Yes, sir.
Or actually in a couple days. It's Sunday. It's not the offseason. I'll talk to you in a couple days.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.